The mystery of two girls left in a park in 1989 has finally been solved after over 30 years, with heartbreaking truth about their mother. For more than 30 years, the identity of the young woman discovered lifeless and unidentified in the Arizona desert remained a mystery. Her remains were found off a remote road in 1989, left behind with clear signs of violence. Investigators referred to her only as Jane Doe. She had no ID, they had no witnesses, and no one to interview. 2 days after her body was found, nearly 300 miles away in California, two baby girls, one barely a toddler, the other still an infant, were discovered alone in a park restroom. They were cold, crying, lying on the wet tile floor of a public bathroom. Police had no clues to the identity or how they'd come to be left there, until 36 years later. It was cold in the Arizona high desert that winter. The call came in just before midday. Hunters had stumbled across the body of a young woman off Old Temple Bar Road near White Hills. She was naked, dumped in the brush off a remote stretch of highway that few had reason to travel. The body showed multiple sharp force injuries. Investigators combed the scene. There was no purse, no ID, and no vehicle nearby. No missing persons report matched her description. They took her fingerprints, stored tissue samples, and entered her information into databases. But no match came back. She would be laid to rest under a name that wasn't hers, just Jane Doe. Her case, like too many, went cold. In Oxnard, California, a woman walking near a park restroom heard what sounded like babies crying. Inside the women's bathroom, she found two young girls, one wrapped in a light yellow blanket, the other shivering. One looked about 14 months old, the other no more than 2 months. There were no signs of who had left them there. Paramedics arrived, then police. The girls were taken into protective custody and later placed into foster care. No one came forward to claim them. With no parent located, the sisters were eventually adopted by a family in Ventura County. They grew up knowing they'd been found under unusual circumstances, but the full truth of what happened before that night remained hidden, sealed in time and the body of a Jane Doe, hundreds of miles away. In early 2022, the cold case file was reopened. Technicians submitted the Jane Doe's fingerprints to national databases again, hoping time and improved technology might give them something to work with. This time, the prints hit. A match to a woman arrested for shoplifting in Bakersfield, California, in 1989 under the name Maria Ortiz. It wasn't much. No one by that name had been reported missing. But when investigators began calling old contacts linked to the arrest record, they got a break. A woman said she didn't know anyone named Maria Ortiz, but she did have a cousin who had vanished in 1989. Her name was Marina Ramos. She had disappeared suddenly, and the family never knew what became of her. When Marina's photo was compared to Jane Doe's composite sketch, the resemblance was uncanny. And Marina, it turned out, had used the alias Maria Ortiz when she'd been arrested that summer in Bakersfield. The fingerprints matched. The physical description matched. They had finally found her name. Jane Doe was Marina Ramos. Marina's identification opened another equally urgent question. She had two daughters in 1989, Elizabeth and Jasmine. No one had seen them since her disappearance. Had they been killed too? Sold? Left with someone? Their names weren't in any system. Their disappearance had never been officially documented. What no one had realized was that the mystery of the two abandoned girls in the Oxnard restroom, unsolved in its own right, was directly connected to Marina's death. In 2023, the Cold Case Unit began a public outreach campaign. They released Marina's name, her photo, and pleaded for information on her daughters. Months passed. Then came the message that changed everything. A woman reached out to investigators after seeing Marina's name. She believed she might be one of the daughters. She and her sister had been told they were adopted. She had newspaper clippings about being found in a park bathroom in December 1989. It matched everything. Investigators obtained DNA samples from the two women, and the results confirmed it. they were the daughters of Marina Ramos. The two sisters, now adults, had always lived with questions. Why were they abandoned? Who were their birth parents? Why had no one ever come looking? They knew they'd been adopted. They knew their origin story involved a public park, a woman who found them crying, and a case that no one ever solved. But they never expected the story would lead to a murder in another state. A mother killed and left in the desert, her name erased. Now, after 36 years, they finally had answers. And a name. Their mother hadn't left them because she didn't care. She hadn't vanished willingly. She had been murdered, and someone, for reasons still unknown, had taken the girls from her and left them behind like afterthoughts. That someone is still out there. Detectives have spent years reconstructing what little is known about the days before Marina's death. They know she was arrested in Bakersfield in June 1989, using the name Maria Ortiz. She had no fixed address but may have stayed in the area with friends. She was 29 years old, struggling, perhaps transient. She may have been in a relationship with a man known only by the first name Fernando. Some witness reports from 1989 suggest Marina was seen in the company of two Hispanic men and another woman around the time of her death. One witness described a black mini pickup truck. Another remembered one of the children being wrapped in a light blanket. None of those leads panned out at the time. Now, decades later, detectives are retracing every possible clue. The clothing, the vehicle, the people last seen with her. They're hoping someone, anyone, will remember something new. Even one forgotten detail might bring the killer into the light. Marina's body was found on December 12, 1989. The girls were discovered on December 14th. That means someone had custody of both Marina and the children at the time of the murder. Whoever killed her was likely the one who left the girls behind. But why spare them? Why abandon them in California instead of killing them too? Was it guilt? A hasty escape plan? A warning to someone else? It's possible Marina trusted the wrong people. People she thought would help her or give her shelter. It's also possible she was being controlled or manipulated, and that her children were used as leverage. Or perhaps she was trying to escape something darker. None of it explains why no one ever reported her missing, or why, for so long, no one connected the murder victim in Arizona to the girls in California. What we know now. The name Marina Ramos is no longer buried under an alias. Her daughters, now in their 30s, are no longer anonymous victims of abandonment. They have names, roots, a history, and a mother who can finally be mourned properly. But justice still hasn't been served. There have been no arrests. No one has stepped forward with new information. Detectives believe the killer is still alive, perhaps unaware that the case has been reopened. Perhaps watching from afar as the truth creeps closer. They urge anyone who lived in Bakersfield or Oxnard in the late 1980s to come forward with any memory, no matter how small. Someone knows who Marina was with in those final days. Someone knows who put her body in the desert and walked away. Cold cases aren't just about evidence. They're about people, about daughters who grew up never knowing their mother's name, about investigators who never gave up, about families who waited decades for closure. Marina Ramos was more than a victim. She was a mother, a sister, a woman who deserved more than a shallow grave and a placeholder name. Now, thanks to the persistence of modern forensic teams and the strength of her daughters, the silence has been broken. But the final chapter remains unwritten. Someone still knows the rest of the story. And now that Marina has her name back, the search for justice continues.